Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Should have been read. Today I'll be doing my February wrap up. Before I get started, if you are new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below as well as the notification bell. But if you're new, welcome, hello. I'm Stephanie and I talk about books, but let's just get right into all the books that I read for February. So February was a much better month compared to January. I will link above and down below my January wrap up, but I didn't do so well in January. But February, I somehow managed to read 15 books, which meant I read a total of 6,075 pages. And out of those 15 books, I read 4 books that were 3 stars, 1 book that was 3.5 stars, 8 books that were 4 stars, which is amazing, 1 book that was 4.5 stars, and then 1 book that was 5 stars. So as you can clearly tell, the quality of the books was pretty fucking good, as well as the quantity of the books. So the first book I want to talk about is The Devouring by Christine Lynn Herman. This book I gave 4 stars. I also talked this a little bit more in my reading vlog, which I did a weekend reading vlog a couple weeks ago, which I will link above and down below in case you want to check that out. But I really enjoyed this book. This is a reread for me. I was reading this for my series vlog, which should be out shortly, hopefully next week or 2. But I was really surprised by how well this book held up after all these years, because I did read this a couple years ago and I enjoyed it back then, but usually when I reread books, I don't know how well they'll hold up just because of my reading preferences have changed, the times have changed, etc. But I was really surprised to find out how much I still really enjoy this book. This book basically follows a couple of main characters where they are the descendants of the founding family of the small town, and the reason why they are special is because they have these magical abilities or these powers where they can succumb this monster in the gray to protect the little town. And as the book kind of continues, they uncover secrets that have been buried from ages ago back to the original founders, and you know, things kind of happen from there. It was a really fucking good book. Like I said already, I really enjoyed the characters, I really enjoyed the plot, the pacing of the book was really well done, the writing, just everything was phenomenal. The reason why this is not a 5-star read is because even though I really enjoyed this book, it's not an amazing read. Like I really liked it. That's kind of how I kind of categorize my 4 stars versus 5 stars. 5 stars are ones where I will like rave about nonstop, shout it to the world. This is more like, I really enjoyed it, you should pick it up, and like that's that kind of situation. Next book I picked up is This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron. This book I also gave 4 stars. I also did read this in my reading vlog, the same one that I read, The Devouring, which I will again link above and down below. I also really fucking enjoyed this book as well. This was such a surprise because if you had watched that video, I was super hesitant about going into this book. Like I picked it up because I was like, I'm curious, but I did read her debut book, which is, I think it's her debut book, which is Cinderella is Dead, and I really did not like it. I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the plot, pacing, all that stuff was just not the greatest for me. It just didn't vibe. And this one, pleasantly surprised, I really enjoyed it. It basically follows a girl called Brie, where she has this magical plant ability. Ever since she was young, she had the ability to kind of grow plants out of nothing essentially. And as she grew older, she realized that her ability was starting to get out of control and that her ability was getting more and more powerful. And suddenly one day she finds out that her aunt had passed away and had left her this dilapidated estate up in rural New York. Her and her family lives in New York City. And another thing to point out is that she's actually adopted. And so because of this, she didn't know who her birth mother was. And of course, she didn't know who her aunt was. So this whole estate being passed on to her came at a complete surprise. And due to other situations, her family and her decide that, you know what, let's take a break. Let's go up to rural New York, check out this estate, and maybe you'll also be able to practice and learn to control your magic. And as she gets there, she finds out a lot more about this town, what her biological family did in this town, and like the secrets that they had there. It was a really good read. I feel like I didn't expect the direction that this book went through. Let's just say there's mythology in here, and I didn't know how much of a major part of mythology it played, but I really enjoy mythology, so I think that's also why I really enjoyed the series. And as soon as I finished this book, I immediately picked up the second book and finished it. But I did finish that in March, so that will be in my March wrap up. But all I can say is really fucking enjoy the series. If you're looking for a really good fantasy, like a young adult fantasy with some mythological aspects in it, definitely check out this one. The next book I picked up is Wings of Ebony by J.L. This book I gave 3 stars. Once again, I did also read this book in the same reading vlog, so I will link that above and down below. Definitely check out that reading vlog. But this book was very mediocre for me. I felt like I expected so much from this book because of all the other rave reviews that I read or saw previously, but unfortunately when I was reading it, I was just way too frustrated with the main character to really enjoy the plot and the story and the other characters. I mean, I liked everything else, objectively speaking, but it's just the fact that the main character and her attitude and her mentality and the way how she kind of like assumed things, it just aggravated to me no end. And so I personally, like, the way how I view main characters is really personal. So if I don't like the main characters, it immediately, like, the book immediately just feels less than good for me, just because the main character is obviously such a main component to the story, and so I was not a fan. Next book I picked up is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillick. This book I gave 3 stars. I just want to state that I have the Fairy Loot edition, which is absolutely stunning. I mean, look at this. Look at that. And also inside here as well. But I thought this book would be amazing, and unfortunately I think this is okay read. So this book basically follows a girl called Elspeth who has this creature living inside her head. She calls it the nightmare, and this world has these infections where if you catch them when you're a child, you either die or you become like cursed with these magical abilities, and the king and like the throne, the kingdom, does not like that. So when you find out that a kid is infected, usually death is the answer. But somehow, because of Elspeth's parentage, she manages to skirt under this law and survives, and now she has this creature living in her head called a nightmare because of her magical ability. There's obviously a lot more to the story, but I'm not going to go into it too much because spoilers. But all I can say is that I felt like, I guess I expected a lot from this book because I've heard so many good things about it, but unfortunately I felt very disconnected with the main characters. I didn't really care too much about the plot. I also felt like the pacing was a little bit slow considering this is supposed to be a horror fantasy, and I don't know, I just expected it to be a lot more fast-paced, but that was not the case. There's also this romance in here that, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes romances should not be there, and I feel like I've stated this in multiple videos, but I don't like the fact that there's always this stigma of having or like requiring a type of romance as a subplot when that necessarily doesn't really improve the plot, and in fact sometimes takes away from the story. And I feel like in this case that was kind of the situation. I didn't necessarily completely dislike the romance, I just felt like it didn't really do much for the story overall, and that it could have just been cut out and it would have been totally fine. Next book I picked up is 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson. This book I gave 4 stars. I was really happy about this book because I read the Truly Devious series, which I absolutely adored, and then I read the 4th book, which honestly was just an okay read. I didn't really care much for it, so when I saw that she had another like a standalone type of book, it's technically part of the series because it still follows the same characters, but it's not like Truly Devious, the first 3, where it's the same mystery and you're just solving it all together. It's another like standalone mystery in a way, and I was very skeptical about it, but thankfully I really fucking enjoyed it. It was definitely not the same, like on the same bar as the Truly Devious original series, but I still really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the plot. I thought that everything was really well done in terms of the pacing and the writing, so I still really enjoyed the story. So if you kind of like lost faith in the 4th book, I still suggest you to read this last book. At least I hope it's the last book in the series, because I personally really enjoyed, actually I don't think it's the last book, because the way how the book ended definitely had like a cliffhanger tone to it. So I don't know, I feel like there definitely will be a sequel after this, so we'll see, but definitely recommend this book. Next book I picked up is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Surley. This book I gave 3 stars. This book is about this powerful bond between a mother and her daughter after her mother passes away, and now the main character, Katie, she is basically in mourning, in grief, like grief-stricken about the whole situation. But because her and her mother actually planned out this trip to visit the Amalfi Coast, she decides to go on this trip anyways without her mother, just so she can get a better glimpse of her mother's past, because apparently this trip that she took back in the day was life-changing. So now she's curious about this trip, and her mother has been planning this trip for a while now, but you know, things happen, so she's going on this trip without her. Shortly after she arrives there, you know, she starts to get the sense of her mother's wandering spirit, and before long she actually runs into a mother who is 30 years old. So basically a blast from the past. And honestly, I don't know why. I think because I read In 5 Years, and that was definitely a story about love and romance, I just kind of assumed that was the same for this one. And even though I know this was gonna be like a mother-daughter bonding type of book, I thought that the romance would be a very big part. That was not the case. It pretty much was not in the picture. It was very much a subplot where she's married and she's just kind of debating about whether or not she wants to stay with her husband. But that was something that was brought up in the very beginning of the book, and then when she got to the Amalfi Coast area, she like forgot about her husband for the most part. So like for me, I was expecting the romance to be a bigger role just because of the past book and like my experience there, but that was not the case. So if you're looking for a purely powerful bond book between mother-daughter type of story, this is it. Unfortunately, I felt like this was a good book, but just not what I was really expecting and not what I was really looking for when I had picked up this book. All right, then this next book I picked up is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. This book I gave 4 stars. All I can say about this book is that this is a book where the smut actually delivers, because I have seen so many people saying these books are spicy, and I pick it up and I'm like, where is the fucking spice? There's no spice. There's like 2 scenes in an entire book which I'm like, it's just basically a story that just happens to have a sex scene or 2. Like, that is not spice for me. This book is one that actually had spice. I would say it encompasses about 50% of the plot, perhaps even more, maybe even 60%. It was just very fucking steamy. It basically follows a woman who somehow gets captured into this alien spaceship, and she, alongside I think it's like 11 other females, I want to say it's like 12 total, are captured by these aliens. And before long, something happens with the ship, and the aliens essentially ejects them as cargo and puts them into this like foreign isolated planet to be picked up later while they like go off and fix their ship or something like that. And now her and these girls are just stranded on this very cold terrain. They have no idea what's going on, and she somehow decides to volunteer and set off and find a way to find help, find food, shelter, all that stuff. Long and behold, she ends up meeting a guy. He is a alien, very large, very blue, think Avatar looking, and he's immediately like, she's the one for me, you know. And of course, like, sex ensues and things happen from there. Personally, I felt like the plot was very cheesy. It definitely wasn't like meant for the plot, but at the same time the plot was there kind of as a, you know, it has to be there. But what I can say though is that it was extremely entertaining, and the entire time I was just like laughing. And this is such a good like palate cleanser if you're between a bunch of like heavy fantasy books type of situation. This is the perfect book because you're just reading it and it just flies through. It's also, I also did an audiobook, and it was only 6 hours long, so I had it on like 2 times the speed. I was through it in a couple of hours. It was great. It was great for just to like read and enjoy purely for entertainment purposes. So if you're looking for an actual book that has actual smut in it and not like 2 fucking scenes, this is the book for you. All right, then the next book that I picked up is actually a series. So I managed to read the entire series of Crown of Feathers, which is Heart of Flames, as well as Wings of Shadow. And so for these books, I gave this book 4 stars, the second book 3.5 stars, and then I gave the final book 4.5 stars. So as you can clearly tell, the last book was definitely by far my favorite. This is a really good start to it, and the second book was definitely my least favorite of the 3, but overall I would say the total series I gave 4 stars. It follows these 2 sisters, Veronica and Val. Due to political situations, they're abandoned, and now they're just living by themselves, trying to find phoenix eggs to hatch. And right now, the way how the country works is that animages, who are people who can control animals with animal magic, are essentially taken as slaves, and you know, they're essentially enslaved. So she and her sister have been trying to hide from them while also trying to find phoenix eggs to see if there's a way for them to revive the Phoenix Kingdom and, you know, take back their throne. So I really enjoyed the series. I thought the sisters, like the sister rivalry, their relationship had so many ups and downs, and I loved how the series really portrayed both ups and downs, and kind of how Veronica really grew into herself. I feel like her as a character changed so much, and she matured and just grew a lot throughout the story, because you see her in the beginning as a very naive girl who always needed someone to take care of her. But as the story kind of progresses, she learns to rely more on herself, rely on people who can actually take care of her without it being toxic, and just learn to actually become a leader. The one thing I would say about the series is at the end, I felt like, while I understand where they come from, because it's like they go through so many things, but some of the leaders who become part of like very main leader figures in the kingdom are like 16 years old, and I'm like, I don't know about that. It seems a little far-fetched to me. But I did talk about this a lot more in my series vlog, which, like I said earlier on, I hope to have that up the next week or two, and then you will see a lot more of my in-depth thoughts about the series. But overall, really happy that I finished this. Next book I picked up is The Last Mrs Parish by Liv Constantine. This book I gave 4 stars. This book follows a woman called Amber, where she is trying to insert herself into Daphne's life. Daphne is the rich Mrs. Parish. Her husband is extremely wealthy, has his own business, extremely handsome, and Daphne seemingly has the perfect life. And so Amber, due to her history of trying to like con people, you don't really know what's happening, but like you get the sense that she's been conning people for a while, or like at least tricking people for things for a while now. Basically adjusts herself and re-changes herself to fit into Daphne's world. And as the story progresses, her and Daphne become extremely close, and you find out later that she actually has a hidden agenda for Daphne. This book was so shocking for me. I started this book kind of like, I don't really know what to expect, because I feel like I've been DNFing books left and right these days. So whenever I pick up an audiobook, I'm just like, will this be good? I don't know, I hope so. And this was like that. I didn't really expect it to be good, but then as I got into the story, it like sucked me in. I was so invested with Amber and like what it's actually doing. And as the book kind of progresses, you find out what exactly is her plan for Daphne and what it's trying to do. And what was shocking to me was that at the very end, I would say like the last third of the book, it switches completely and you get Daphne's perspective. And then from Daphne, you're just like, oh my god, like so much craziness is happening, and it was wild. I really enjoyed this book in terms of the twisty turns. Loved it. I thought this book did a phenomenal job. Highly recommend if you're looking for a twisty psychological thriller. The next book I picked up is Independence by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Hoping I pronounced that name correctly. This book I gave 4 stars. This was actually from my book club pick, and I can safely say that we all really enjoyed this book. The biggest issue of this book was actually Jamini. I feel like no one liked her. There's a lot of things that she said and did throughout the book that just like triggered us, and I feel like half of the time we were talking about this book during book club, we were just bashing her because she just did so many things that, I don't know, like it was just not okay. And everyone else was great. I loved everyone else. Oh well, no, I think everyone else had their ups and downs, but Jamini pretty much had only cons to her character. There was no pros, okay? She had like one pro, and that was her love for like her mom or something like that. But at the same time, her love for her mom was motivated by like ulterior motives. So again, not the best intentions, but really enjoyed this book. I think this book had amazing discussion points. So if you're looking for a really good like talking point type of book, a discussion book, this is definitely it. The next book I picked up is Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. This book I gave 5 stars. I love this book. This was so freaking good. I think after I read this book, I kept talking about it to like my boyfriend and my friends, because I was just like, you need to read this book. This book basically follows a woman. Her name is Una, where I think it's like 1982. She's New Year's Eve. It's her birthday, and she's celebrating her 19th birthday. And just when she turns 19, she suddenly wakes up to the body of a 51-year-old. And now she's like, what the hell is going on? Why am I suddenly 51? What's happening? And as the story progresses, she finds out that every single year her body will wake up in a different time period. So she'll jump from 51 to, I don't know, like 28, then she'll jump back to 40, like back and forth. So basically she is living life out of order, hence the title of this book. I really enjoyed this book. I thought this book had so many good elements. I felt like she never really knew what was happening, and there were times when she would like find love, but then she's like, is this actually love? Like, what will happen in the future? Like, what happened in the past? Like, what's going on here? And she will also tend to leave these little notes for her when she first, land, so she's not completely like caught off guard. So she has a little like spark notes essentially about the previous year. I I just really enjoyed this book, guys. It was just so entertaining. I was so invested for her story because I was prepared to just read every single year of her life, you know, because I was so fascinated. Like, that's how invested I was with her story, and that's why I love this book so much, because I was so immersed with the character, and for me that makes it a solid 5-star read. The next book I picked up is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This book I gave 3 stars. This is a perfect example of a book that a lot of people touted as smut. There's like 2 scenes here, guys, and it's not even like that smutty of a scene. It's just like, okay, they're having sex, cool kind of situation. So I went into it expecting a full-on smut kind of story. That's not the case, so I was extremely disappointed on that end, which is why 3 stars. However, at the same time, I love mythology, and this is a Persephone Hades like retelling, so I was all here for that in terms of the plot. But in terms of my expectations going into it, I was just sort of disappointed because where's the smut, guys? Like, you guys are all liars essentially, okay? That's what I've realized. Either that or I am just really out there in terms of my smut expectations, and you guys are just very like innocent, I guess. I don't know, but I was like, this is not smut, okay? That's all I can say. And just a side note, I would not be picking up the rest of the series because even though I enjoyed the plot, it wasn't that engaging for me, and I was just really here for it for the smut elements, and since I didn't get that, I'm kind of like eh. At the same time, I did hear that the second book is a lot smuttier, but I'm hesitant now. I feel like I don't want to spend time reading a book and then get disappointed when I found out there's like, instead of 2 scenes, there's like 3 scenes, okay? Like, that's not smutty for me, okay, guys? That's all I can say. Then the final book I want to talk about is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hiller. This book I gave 4 stars. To be quite honest, I did read this book. I think this is the first book I read this month, so I don't entirely remember what this book is about. All I can say is that her child went missing, and ever since she went missing, her entire life is just dedicated to this PI, where she's tasked with finding out what happened, searching everything that she can possibly search, find out what's happening, and then her husband Derek just becoming more and more aloof. One day she finds out that her husband's actually had an affair, and now she finds out that, you know what, I can't tackle the whole missing son element because the leads have all gone cold. However, her husband's mistress is a problem that she can fix, and so the story kind of goes along there. I don't remember how that progressed. I do remember the ending of the story, and it was quite a shocker. But in terms of like the middle parts, like I remember the beginning of the book and I remember the end of the book. I don't remember the middle of the book, but I just remember really enjoying this book while I was reading it, hence why I still gave it 4 stars, and the shocking element at the end. So if you're looking for a good thriller, I still recommend this one, even though I cannot for the life of me remember what happened in the middle of the book. So anyways, that's it for this video. These are all the books I read this past month. Let me know down below if you have read any of these books before. What did you guys think about it? Do you agree or disagree with what I say about like smut in general? Because I am just curious. But as always, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up or just subscribe to my channel. And if you'd like to see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as the notification bell. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.